The Chancellor, The Remarkable Odyssey of Angela Merkel by Kati Marton. Published in 2021. Angela Merkel's leadership as Germany's Chancellor from 2005 to 2021 represents a pivotal period in modern European history, characterized by profound political, economic, and social transformations. To fully grasp her chancellorship, it is crucial to understand the historical forces that shaped Germany after World War II. Following the end of World War II and the collapse of the Third Reich, Germany was split into 4 occupation zones, each controlled by one of the Allied powers, the United States, the United Kingdom, France, and the Soviet Union. The zones under Western influence, governed by democratic ideals and capitalism, eventually united in 1949 to form the Federal Republic of Germany, FRG. In contrast, the Eastern Zone, under Soviet control, became the German Democratic Republic, GDR, and followed the Soviet version of Marxist principles. This division created 2 very different German states. The FRG, with its capital in Bonn, emerged as a prosperous, democratic nation integrated into Western Europe and NATO, while the GDR, with East Berlin as its capital, was marked by strict state control and limited personal freedoms. The erection of the Berlin Wall in 1961 came to symbolize this deep ideological rift and the broader Cold War confrontation. The fall of the Berlin Wall in November 1989 signaled the end of the Cold War and the collapse of the communist regimes that the USSR had supported across Eastern Europe. In response to mass protests and growing pressures, the East German government eventually allowed free border crossings, igniting scenes of jubilation as families and friends reunited while dismantling the wall. This momentous event paved the way for German reunification, officially completed in October 1990, which fundamentally reshaped the nation's political landscape and had a lasting impact on Merkel's approach to leadership. The subsequent dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991 further reconfigured the global order. Moreover, the historical legacy of the Holocaust plays a central role in understanding Germany's identity and political framework. Under Adolf Hitler, the Nazi regime orchestrated the systematic genocide of 6 million Jews, along with millions of Romani people, disabled individuals, political dissidents, and others. This collective memory of atrocity and destruction has deeply influenced Germany's post-war policies, which prioritize democracy, human rights, demilitarization, and a steadfast commitment to peace and reconciliation. These guiding principles have not only shaped modern Germany but also defined the policy foundation of Angela Merkel's tenure as Chancellor. Prologue Summary: The Pastor's Daughter. In the prologue of The Chancellor, Kati Marton opens with a vivid portrayal of Angela Merkel as she steps into a simple chapel in Potsdam. Unlike the typical media frenzy that accompanies a world leader, the setting is quiet and unassuming. Although Merkel dislikes being in front of cameras, she offers a warm smile that creates a personal connection with her audience. The chapel, which evokes memories of Merkel's upbringing as the daughter of a pastor in East Germany, offers a brief escape from the hectic challenges of her final term as Germany's Chancellor. Merkel's address in the chapel begins with reflections on her father's work in ministry. Marton explains that her father's vocation placed the family in a delicate social position in East Germany, as they were seen as bourgeois rather than proletarian. In an environment where speaking one's mind could invite trouble under a repressive regime controlled by the Stasi, these early experiences instilled in Merkel a cautious approach to both personal expression and politics. Throughout her career, this sense of reserve has contributed to the air of mystery that surrounds her. Marton goes on to describe Merkel's time in office as being marked by a pragmatic, long-term vision. Merkel was adept at borrowing good ideas from across the political spectrum and building strong coalitions. Despite her modest public persona and unassuming rhetoric, she steered Germany to become an economic powerhouse and moral leader in Europe. Her leadership, grounded in a focus on tangible results and free of overt ego, allowed her to successfully navigate complex political challenges and address global issues. Merkel's East German roots further shaped her political approach, teaching her that freedom is delicate and that protecting democratic values is essential. Marton states that her goal in writing this biography is to reveal how Merkel, once considered an outsider in Western German politics because of her East German background, scientific education, and gender, rose to become one of the world's most powerful politicians. Through interviews and personal interactions, Marton offers fresh insights into Merkel's life, shedding light on the personal experiences that have fueled her lasting influence on global affairs. Chapter 1 Summary: Against the Tide. This chapter delves into the early life of Angela Merkel, born Angela Kästner, and the profound influence of her father, Horst Kästner. Horst's early life was steeped in the era of Nazi Germany. He was a member of a Nazi youth organization during Hitler's regime, was recruited into the Nazi armed forces at 18, and later captured by the Allies. Following his release, Horst pursued theological training and eventually became a pastor. According to Merkel's own recollections, as noted in interviews, her father was a stern, ascetic man who remained largely unappreciative of her achievements throughout his life. Angela was born in Hamburg in 1954, a port city slowly emerging from the devastation of World War II and reclaiming its status as a center of trade and culture. Not long after her birth, however, the Kastner family moved to Quitzow, a small town in East Germany. There, Horst Kastner embarked on his ministry with a focus on serving an underserved region, a choice seen as both risky and unconventional amid the instability, poverty, and political unrest of East Germany. Horst's unwavering commitment to his faith and congregation came at the cost of familial warmth, leaving young Angela longing for his approval and presence. His willingness to accommodate the demands of the East German regime stirred controversy within the religious community. Yet, through his actions, Angela learned critical lessons in political pragmatism, such as the necessity of compromise and the importance of seeking the best possible outcome in challenging situations. The dramatic contrast between the vibrant, bustling Hamburg and the stark, austere life in East Germany deeply marked her childhood. Settling later in Templin, Angela grew up in an environment defined by simplicity and a close bond with nature. Her early years were imbued with values of sacrifice, self-discipline, and service, values instilled by her parents in the midst of an oppressive political climate. Amid these conditions, Angela's intellectual curiosity blossomed. She developed a passion for Russian literature and language, often finding solace in the world of books. The family's residence on the plain Waldhof church compound, complete with a shelter for disabled individuals, left a lasting impression on her, nurturing a lifelong commitment to supporting the disabled community. From a young age, Angela demonstrated notable academic potential, earning top honors and seizing every opportunity that arose. She adeptly navigated the challenges of East German society, balancing her participation in both religious and communist youth groups. However, in her final year of high school, a misstep nearly jeopardized her future. A prank involving an English-language version of a song during a celebration of Marxism-Leninism provoked harsh punishment from the political authorities, as English was deemed an imperialist language. Luckily, intervention from her father's influential connections spared her academic career, allowing her to enroll at Leipzig University and continue her studies. This chapter thus paints a picture of Angela Merkel's early life, a blend of hardship, intellectual rigor, and the subtle lessons of political survival, all set against the backdrop of a divided and repressive East Germany. These experiences would later shape her pragmatic and determined approach to leadership on the global stage. Chapter 2 Summary, Leipzig, on her own. In the fall of 1973, at the age of 19, Angela embarked on her academic journey at Leipzig University, located in East Germany. This period was marked by an even more repressive political climate, as numerous citizens were imprisoned for supporting reform movements like the Prague Spring, which had challenged Leonid Brezhnev's strict Stalinist policies. In such an atmosphere, studying the humanities was fraught with difficulties due to scarce access to books and pervasive government monitoring. To avoid these ideological constraints, Angela opted for the sciences, choosing to study physics, a field that promised a degree of intellectual freedom. Leipzig, with its storied academic traditions, offered her a fresh start and a welcome distance from her critical father. At the university, Angela was one among only 7 women in her physics program, distinguished by her brilliance and calm precision. She skillfully navigated the rigors of East German higher education, where access to Western scientific literature was limited. The only blemish on her academic record came from the required course in Marxism-Leninism. Alongside her studies, Angela discreetly maintained her religious beliefs. Her practical nature shone through even in her work at the Student Union, where she held a bartending job selling a popular concoction, a mix of whiskey and cherry juice, to fellow students, keeping the proceeds. During a trip to the USSR, Angela met Ulrich Merkel, a fellow physics student with whom she eventually fell in love. The two married when Angela was 23, and although their living conditions were modest, their commitment to building a future together was strong. Despite her notable academic achievements, however, Angela's career prospects were limited by her family's bourgeois background, which made a university teaching position unattainable. As a result, she pursued further studies, earning both an MA and a PhD in nuclear physics. Chapter 3 Summary, Berlin. After earning her PhD, Angela Merkel applied for a position at the Technical University Ilmenau, where Stasi agents attempted to recruit her as an informant. She skillfully evaded their efforts, and together with her husband Ulrich, she secured research roles at the East German Academy of Sciences in Berlin. There, she worked in a lab that lacked adequate equipment, and the monotonous nature of her work eventually left her disillusioned. During this period, Merkel resided in East Berlin in a cramped, noisy apartment close to the Berlin Wall. Her personal life was equally challenging, culminating in an amicable divorce from Ulrich, although she retained his surname even after remarrying. She later settled into a modest flat in a peripheral neighborhood. Her father was unsupportive of these life changes, yet Merkel persisted with resilience. As her environment evolved, Merkel's social circle began to expand. Unbeknownst to her, she formed a friendship with Frank Schneider, a colleague working in the same laboratory who was actually a Stasi informant. Schneider did not report any political activities on her part. Instead, he focused on gossip about her alleged numerous love affairs and her parents' life in Templin, a place to which she had invited him, without suspicion. Merkel also developed a close acquaintance with Michael Schindhelm, a quantum chemist who shared news about Mikhail Gorbachev's reform initiatives in the USSR, drawn from his years of study there. This friendship broadened Merkel's perspective on the political landscape, further fueling her own political ambitions. A turning point in her understanding of Germany's history occurred in 1985 when she experienced West German President Richard von Weizsäcker's commemorative speech marking the end of World War II and remembering the Holocaust. This event deeply influenced her sense of Germany's historical responsibility and the importance of confronting the past. In 1986, a trip to West Germany solidified her belief in the eventual collapse of the Eastern Bloc. This journey, coupled with her emerging relationship with Joachim Sauer, her future husband, signaled the onset of a profound political and personal transformation for Angela Merkel. Chapter 4 Summary, 1989. Chapter 4 begins with the dramatic collapse of the Berlin Wall and Angela Merkel's measured response to this world-changing moment. The wall fell with little ceremony. An East German government spokesman nonchalantly announced that travel to the West was now permitted, sending shockwaves through the nation. True to her routine, Merkel first went to the sauna before joining in the festivities at the Bornholmer Bridge and even making a brief visit to a West German family's apartment. Despite the widespread excitement, Merkel stayed pragmatic and returned home early. The fall of the Berlin Wall left East Germans, including Merkel, both astonished and elated by the sudden freedoms they gained. Although the government had not resorted to force to suppress the change, there was an overwhelming mix of uncertainty and jubilation. Life for Merkel began to shift in small, significant ways, such as attending a science conference in Poland where the potential for German reunification was discussed. It wasn't long before Merkel recognized that her career as a physicist seemed increasingly out of place in this new political landscape. Eager to connect with people and explore emerging opportunities, she decided by late 1989 to take a plunge into politics. She joined the Demokratischer Aufbruch, Democratic Awakening, DA, which would later merge with the Christian Democratic Union, CDU. Her precise, methodical approach, shaped by her scientific training, earned her respect among her new political peers, leading to her appointment as the party's spokesperson. Amid the rapid changes and challenges facing East Germans, Merkel was resolute in her determination to adapt and succeed. She consciously distanced herself from socialist ideologies and gravitated toward more pragmatic, less dogmatic circles. This careful, rational approach, combined with her willingness to seize new opportunities, laid the groundwork for her future influential political career. Chapter 5 Summary, The Apprentice. This chapter details Angela Merkel's rapid political ascent in post-reunification Germany, a journey propelled by her distinctive background as an ambitious woman from East Germany. Chancellor Helmut Kohl was committed to integrating East Germans and women into the new national leadership, and Merkel embodied this vision. Her rise, though marked by calculated decisions that sometimes pitted her against mentors and close allies, exemplified her pragmatic approach. Many of Merkel's early East German mentors had been ousted amid scandals involving alleged Stasi ties or corruption, which inadvertently cleared the path for her own advancement. For example, Wolfgang Schnurr, a co-founder of the Demokratischer Aufbruch, DA, was exposed as a Stasi informer, and Merkel, then DA spokesperson, managed the crisis with composed, strategic precision. Similarly, Lothar de Maizière, a leading reformist, appointed her as the deputy spokesperson for East Germany's first democratic government. Yet, when de Maizière's career collapsed under false Stasi allegations, Merkel's unwillingness to defend him underscored her unemotional, methodical political style. In January 1991, Chancellor Kohl elevated her to Minister for Women and Youth, making her the youngest and least experienced member of his cabinet at that time. Transitioning from the East to the male-dominated, austere environment of Bonn, the former capital of West Germany, presented its own set of challenges, but Merkel tackled them with resolve. Her political journey soon gained international dimensions as she established vital connections, including a friendship with Henry Kissinger, who admired her rationality and determination. Despite early obstacles, her persistence and strategic insight earned her a prominent role in German politics. She built a network of independent male sponsors and secured a Bundestag seat representing Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, an East German region. Her empathetic and down-to-earth campaigning style resonated with local voters, ensuring her continued re-election since 1990. Amid internal resistance, exemplified by the formation of the exclusionary Andes Pact, where male politicians banded together against female colleagues, Merkel's resilience shone through. In 1994, Kohl further promoted her by appointing her Minister for the Environment. In this role, Merkel honed her skills in managing the complexities of German politics and media relations. A milestone of her early career was her participation in the 1995 Berlin Climate Conference, marking her international debut and demonstrating her diplomatic prowess. The Berlin Mandate, which set binding targets for emission reductions, was one of her notable early achievements. Merkel's growing confidence was further evidenced when she strategically dismissed a prominent deputy, Clemens Strootman, who had publicly asserted his importance within her cabinet. This move reinforced her resolve and marked her emergence as an increasingly influential leader. Navigating both internal party politics and broader diplomatic challenges, Merkel steadily paved the way for her eventual rise to the highest office in Germany. Chapter 6 Summary, to the Chancellery at last. In 2005, when Chancellor Gerhard Schröder called for early elections, Angela Merkel emerged as the clear choice for the Christian Democratic Union, CDU. Her pragmatic leadership, understated humility, and straightforward communication resonated with the German public. However, her campaign encountered setbacks, notably when her pick, Paul Kirchhoff, proposed a flat tax, an idea that Schröder exploited, nearly tying the election results and forcing arduous coalition negotiations. During a televised debate with Schröder, Merkel's deliberate, measured silence stood in stark contrast to Schröder's forceful rhetoric, earning her widespread favor. Ultimately, she was sworn in as Germany's first female chancellor on November 22, 2005, in the newly restored Reichstag in Berlin, the new capital of the unified country. While her parents and siblings were present for the ceremony, her husband, Joachim Sauer, was notably absent. Despite Schröder's gracious congratulations, old tensions lingered between the political rivals. Merkel's initial years in office were defined by her deep commitment to faith, a strong sense of duty, and a firm belief in democracy. She made evidence-based decisions a cornerstone of her governance. In her domestic and foreign policy agendas, she focused on enhancing Germany's position relative to Russia, combating racism and xenophobia, and reinforcing transatlantic alliances, drawing inspiration from leaders like Ronald Reagan and George W. Bush. Her chancellery was renowned for its calm, businesslike environment, devoid of the ostentatious symbols of power seen in previous administrations. Merkel's working style was characterized by simplicity and clear, direct communication. She maintained a strict separation between her professional and personal life and relied on her trusted chief of staff, Beat Baumann, as well as a close, loyal team for honest advice and support. Throughout her tenure, she remained emotionally detached and committed to rational, methodical decision-making, shunning grandiloquent speeches in favor of plain-spoken dialogue. Among Merkel's notable foreign policy accomplishments was a historic address to the Israeli Knesset in 2008. In her speech, she acknowledged Germany's responsibility for the Holocaust and affirmed a steadfast commitment to Israel's security. Her respectful and earnest words earned applause from Holocaust survivors and solidified her stance on combating antisemitism and fostering strong German-Israeli relations. In 2011, following the Fukushima nuclear disaster, Merkel made a bold and swift decision to phase out nuclear power in Germany. Driven by scientific reasoning and political strategy, this move aimed to boost public confidence and meet environmental targets, while also effectively neutralizing the opposition campaign led by the Green Party. This pivotal decision further highlighted her ability to combine policy, pragmatism, and public sentiment in shaping Germany's future. Chapter 7 Summary, her first American president. During Angela Merkel's first term as Chancellor, the United States was led by President George W. Bush. While the two leaders began with notable ideological differences, they gradually forged a surprising and respectful bond. Merkel, shaped by her upbringing in East Germany, deeply admired the United States. She credited American intervention with helping Germany rebuild after World War II and held a particular reverence for George H. W. Bush, whose steady leadership she believed had facilitated Germany's peaceful reunification. Merkel's diplomatic strategy was grounded in cultivating personal connections to influence policy outcomes. With Bush, she carefully balanced admiration with critique. Her early stance on the Iraq War was markedly more tempered than that of her predecessor, Gerhard Schroeder, who had vocally opposed it. Merkel, while not an outright supporter of the war, recognized the importance of maintaining strong transatlantic ties. At the same time, she did not shy away from voicing principled concerns, publicly criticizing the U.S. detention center at Guantanamo Bay just before meeting with Bush for the first time. It was a calculated move that reflected her careful diplomacy, respectful yet assertive. Their relationship was further solidified during informal exchanges, such as a personal visit by Merkel and her husband to Bush's Texas ranch. These visits offered a setting where Merkel's natural pragmatism and calm demeanor built trust and mutual understanding. Her efforts to improve her English and refine her public image underscored her commitment to forging deeper ties with global leaders. Through tact and quiet determination, Merkel succeeded in influencing American policy discussions on climate change and international sanctions. Merkel's steady leadership during her first term earned her widespread acclaim at home and abroad. Her economic policies contributed to Germany's revitalization, and her modest, results-oriented style resonated strongly with the public. On the international stage, Merkel's rising influence and diplomatic finesse helped solidify her role as a leading voice in global affairs. Chapter 8 Summary: Dictators. In this chapter, Kati Marton explores Angela Merkel's pragmatic diplomacy when navigating relationships with authoritarian regimes, particularly Russia and China. Merkel's method was marked by caution and patience, favoring quiet persistence over dramatic public confrontations. Her goal was always to keep dialogue open, even with the most difficult leaders, while standing firm on democratic values behind closed doors. This approach faced an early test in 2007, when Russian President Vladimir Putin gave a confrontational speech in Munich, harshly criticizing the West and its values. Merkel, deeply troubled by his rhetoric, recognized it as a warning of Russia's more assertive path under Putin's leadership. The moment marked the beginning of what would become a long and complex relationship between the two leaders. Putin, once a KGB officer stationed in East Germany, was deeply shaped by the Soviet Union's collapse, a loss he was determined to reverse. In contrast, Merkel's own memories of Soviet dominance in East Germany were bitter, and she viewed that era as something Germany should never return to. Yet, those very experiences gave Merkel a rare insight into Putin's worldview. She understood his sense of historical loss, his strategic patience, and his affinity for unconventional tactics such as disinformation and cyber attacks. Despite their stark political differences, Merkel and Putin built a relationship rooted in mutual recognition and linguistic fluency. Merkel spoke Russian, Putin spoke German. Merkel's negotiation style with Putin was measured and psychologically astute. She would allow him to air his grievances, almost as a therapist might, before calmly presenting her own, often opposing, position. She never humiliated him, nor did she back down. Her approach was built on maintaining lines of communication and mutual respect, even when their policies sharply diverged. Merkel's relationship with China followed a similarly pragmatic path. Recognizing China's growing global influence early in her chancellorship, she sought to deepen economic ties and open channels for trade and technological collaboration. Her frequent visits to Beijing helped German companies secure valuable contracts, and she expressed admiration for China's rapid development and poverty reduction efforts. However, Merkel's emphasis on human rights often brought tension to the relationship. Her 2007 meeting with the Dalai Lama, though motivated by principle, led to a temporary diplomatic freeze with China. While Merkel remained committed to raising human rights issues, critics accused her of not taking a firm enough stance. She walked a careful line, pushing for German economic interests while quietly advocating for human dignity and democratic values. Throughout her dealings with both Russia and China, Merkel maintained her signature style of leadership, understated, principled, and deeply aware of historical context. Her ability to manage these delicate relationships solidified her reputation as one of the world's most skilled and steady stateswomen. Chapter 9 Summary: The Private Chancellor. This chapter highlights Angela Merkel's remarkable ability to preserve a private life despite the immense public scrutiny of her role as Germany's Chancellor. From the outset of her political career, Merkel has drawn a clear boundary between her public duties and personal space. Her retreat is a modest cottage in Brandenburg, where she lives quietly with her husband, Joachim Sauer. There, Merkel enjoys the simple pleasures of life, cooking meals, listening to opera, and taking long walks in nature, always trailed by her discreet security detail. Her marriage to Sauer, a respected quantum chemist, has been a cornerstone of her emotional well-being. Their relationship is defined by mutual respect and independence. They married without fanfare or extended family in attendance, reflecting Merkel's deeply private nature. While Sauer occasionally offers advice, he largely remains outside the political spotlight, offering Merkel a sanctuary from the relentless pressures of leadership. He also takes care of domestic responsibilities, allowing Merkel to recharge and maintain focus. Merkel's retreat from political society extends to her social circle. She prefers the company of intellectuals, artists, and scientists over that of fellow politicians. These relationships nurture her curiosity and offer her a world outside the often narrow, tactical realm of politics. Her friendships are built on thoughtful conversation and shared cultural interests, not political alliances. Though she keeps her personal life carefully guarded, Merkel occasionally reveals glimpses of her personality to the public. She's known to be a passionate soccer fan, an avid reader of history, and a lover of classical music and cultural events, some of which she attends with Sauer. These small but telling moments have humanized her in the eyes of the public. Ultimately, Merkel's ability to compartmentalize her private and public lives has been key to her resilience. In a role defined by scrutiny and pressure, her carefully maintained inner world has provided the grounding she needed to serve as Germany's steady and enduring leader. Chapter 10 Summary, Limited Partners. In 2009, Angela Merkel addressed the United States Congress with a powerful and personal speech, expressing her deep gratitude for America's role in Germany's post-war recovery and reunification. She spoke movingly about the American dream, describing it as the belief that anyone, regardless of background, can reach their full potential through hard work and determination. Her words resonated across the aisle, revealing her long-standing admiration for American values and the contributions of American soldiers and diplomats to German democracy. Despite the warm reception in Congress, Merkel's relationship with President Barack Obama had a cautious beginning. Merkel was skeptical of Obama's highly charismatic and performance-driven style, which contrasted sharply with her preference for humility, substance, and strategic thinking. A symbolic early disagreement arose when Obama requested to give a speech at Berlin's Brandenburg Gate, an iconic site of German division and unity. Merkel, protective of the monument's historical significance, declined and suggested the less symbolic Victory Column instead. Over time, however, the two leaders developed a respectful working relationship. Merkel came to appreciate Obama's intellect and policy depth, while both shared a strong preference for data-driven governance. Still, their philosophical and strategic differences occasionally created tension. One notable instance was the 2011 intervention in Libya. Merkel, wary of repeating the mistakes of Iraq, chose to abstain from the UN vote establishing a no-fly zone. Her decision, motivated by caution and a commitment to peace, drew international criticism and distanced her from NATO allies, including the US. The most serious strain in Merkel and Obama's relationship came in 2013, when Edward Snowden's revelations exposed that the NSA had monitored Merkel's phone. Although no critical information was compromised, thanks to Merkel's already cautious communication habits, the act was a serious violation of trust. Merkel was deeply disturbed by the intrusion, famously remarking that spying on friends is not acceptable. The incident led to a diplomatic chill between Berlin and Washington. Nevertheless, Merkel's pragmatic nature once again came to the fore. She moved beyond personal offense to preserve the essential partnership between Germany and the United States. In the end, her ability to focus on long-term goals and shared interests allowed her to maintain a functional relationship with Obama and reaffirm the importance of the transatlantic alliance. Chapter 11 Summary, Europe is speaking German now. The 2008 global financial crisis became one of Angela Merkel's most significant leadership tests. As the world economy teetered, the crisis exposed fundamental weaknesses in the European Union's structure, chiefly its lack of a centralized banking authority like the U.S. Federal Reserve and the limited flexibility for labor movement between member nations. Initially less familiar with the nuances of global finance, Merkel had to rapidly learn and adapt. Germany's conservative financial culture and balanced budgets helped the country weather the economic storm better than most. Yet this very strength led to growing resentment from struggling EU members, who saw Germany's economic dominance as both a blessing and a threat. Merkel's government now faced a difficult choice: offer financial aid to countries like Greece or risk the collapse of the euro. While her finance minister, Wolfgang Schäuble, advocated for removing Greece from the eurozone, Merkel resisted. She believed in saving the euro and pushing for reform, not exclusion. Her insistence on strict austerity measures, focused on fiscal discipline, sparked intense backlash. In countries like Greece, Merkel became a symbol of economic hardship. Anti-German sentiment surged, with extreme protest imagery casting her in a harsh and even offensive light, including portrayals likening her to Nazi figures, images that shocked and deeply hurt Merkel. Still, Merkel held her ground, confident that tough reforms were necessary for long-term stability. Partnering with French President Nicolas Sarkozy, she worked to stabilize the Eurozone and restore confidence in the EU's economic future. Their combined leadership helped avert immediate disaster, even though resentment lingered. However, Merkel's hardline approach came at a political cost. At home, her support for financially rescuing struggling EU countries, especially Greece, triggered a backlash. This dissatisfaction gave rise to the far-right Alternative for Deutschland, AfD, a new party that framed Merkel's actions as unjust to ordinary Germans. The AfD's emergence marked a turning point in German politics, challenging Merkel's previously stable political dominance and reflecting the broader populist wave spreading across Europe. Chapter 12 Summary: The War in Ukraine, Get Me Angela on the Phone. Chapter 12 explores Angela Merkel's leadership during Russia's 2014 invasion of Ukraine, a moment that required her to step up as the primary Western figure capable of engaging directly with Vladimir Putin. While the situation was extremely challenging, Merkel showed persistence and strength. The chapter begins by outlining Ukraine's complex geopolitical background, shaped by historical oppression under both Nazi and Soviet regimes. Following the Soviet Union's collapse in 1991, Ukraine faced chronic corruption and instability, setting the stage for crisis when Russia reasserted its influence in 2014. Tensions peaked in February 2014 as Ukraine prepared to sign a crucial agreement with the European Union, signaling its intent to align with the West. In response, Putin pressured Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych to abandon the EU agreement in favor of closer ties with Russia through the Eurasian Economic Union. This reversal triggered widespread protests, ultimately leading to Yanukovych fleeing the country. Seizing the opportunity, Putin launched a military campaign in eastern Ukraine's Donbas region, taking advantage of Ukraine's weak defense system. Employing tactics of misdirection and disinformation, known as Maskirovka, Russia also unlawfully annexed Crimea, escalating the conflict further. Merkel applied her diplomatic expertise to seek peaceful solutions through ongoing dialogue. She had to navigate Putin's misleading and aggressive behavior while working to impose sanctions and maintain unity among European nations. Her efforts were further complicated by differing opinions among global allies. U.S. President Barack Obama, unwilling to speak directly with Putin, relied heavily on Merkel to spearhead negotiations. Despite her dedication and strategic efforts, the conflict persisted. Although she was instrumental in brokering the Minsk agreements, Crimea remained under Russian control, and the broader conflict in Ukraine continued. Chapter 13 Summary: The Summer of Rheims. Chapter 13 focuses on Angela Merkel's groundbreaking 2015 decision to allow refugees into Germany, a defining moment in her leadership. Faced with a growing humanitarian crisis, particularly from war-torn countries like Syria, Merkel made an uncharacteristically bold move for a typically cautious leader. Her decision positioned Germany as a moral leader at a time when many other nations were closing their borders and fostering anti-immigrant sentiment. It underscored Merkel's enduring dedication to human rights. A significant episode highlighted in the chapter is a town hall in Rostock, where a young Lebanese-Palestinian girl, Reem Sawel, voiced her fear of being deported after beginning to settle in Germany. Merkel's initial reply was procedural, but when the girl began to cry, Merkel's tone softened, revealing her compassionate side. As the refugee wave intensified, with around 500,000 people arriving in Germany, Merkel stood in stark contrast to other European leaders like David Cameron and Viktor Orban, who resisted accepting refugees. Graphic images of mistreatment, such as the scenes at Budapest's Keleti train station, struck a deep chord with Merkel, reminding her of the horrors of Europe's past. In August 2015, Merkel announced Germany would keep its borders open to refugees, a move that defied the EU's Dublin regulation. According to Marton, Merkel's motivation stemmed from a clear moral vision and historical awareness, particularly recalling the 1938 Avion Conference, when nations failed to take in Jewish refugees fleeing Nazi Germany. Her stance drew criticism from various quarters, including from members of her own party and prominent conservative voices like Helmut Kohl and Henry Kissinger. Still, Merkel stood firm, believing Germany bore a moral responsibility and seeing the crisis as a chance to reaffirm its humanitarian values. Initially, the German public responded positively, with many citizens volunteering to help the newcomers. But over time, the far-right party Alternative for Deutschland, AfD, which had first gained traction opposing Merkel's support for Greece during the Euro crisis, began to gain momentum by exploiting anti-immigration fears. Merkel also viewed refugee integration as a strategic investment in Germany's aging workforce. However, her failure to fully explain the practical benefits of her policy, often choosing moral reasoning over economic or demographic arguments, left parts of the public unconvinced. Chapter 14 Summary: The Worst of Times. Chapter 14 highlights the turbulent year of 2016 for Angela Merkel, a period filled with challenges that put her leadership to the test. During this time, the European Union began to fracture, Germany suffered multiple terrorist attacks, and Donald Trump's election as U.S. president threatened long-standing transatlantic ties and policies that Merkel had long supported. Merkel had always been cautious about remaining in power too long, wary of repeating the fate of former Chancellor Helmut Kohl, who was forced out after a party scandal involving illegal donations. As her third term neared its end, Merkel initially intended to step down. However, the dramatic events of 2016 compelled her to reconsider. One major turning point was the Brexit referendum in June, which Merkel viewed as a devastating blow to European unity and a win for Russian interests. Around the same time, Germany experienced a wave of terrorist incidents, fueling public fear and criticism of her open-door refugee policy. High-profile attacks, such as the Würzburg train assault and the Munich shooting, increased public anxiety. In response, Merkel addressed the nation, pledging greater attention to security while reaffirming the importance of upholding humanitarian values. Meanwhile, political unrest in Turkey, marked by a failed coup and a harsh crackdown by President Erdogan, complicated Merkel's diplomatic balancing act. The Turkish government's purge of civil society and independent media raised concerns, especially as Germany needed Turkey's cooperation in managing refugee flows into Europe. On the domestic front, Merkel's popularity declined as the far-right AfD gained traction, especially among voters frustrated with her immigration policies. Despite the mounting pressure, Merkel held firm, unwilling to compromise her commitment to refugee protection. The election of Donald Trump in November signaled a major shift in global politics, with his nationalist and authoritarian-leaning rhetoric directly clashing with Merkel's values. Urged by outgoing President Barack Obama, Merkel decided to seek a fourth term, believing her leadership was needed to defend liberal democracy and counter the global rise of populism. The year ended on a tragic note with a terrorist attack at a Berlin Christmas market, killing 12 people and injuring dozens more. Though under immense pressure, Merkel stayed true to her principles and began preparing to lead Germany through another term. Chapter 15 Summary: Enter Trump. Chapter 15 delves into Angela Merkel's interactions with Donald Trump and her approach to handling the challenges posed by his presidency. Ahead of their first meeting, Merkel invested significant effort in understanding Trump's personality by studying his past interviews, books, and even his TV appearances. She found his rally chants, such as the infamous "Lock Her Up," directed at Hillary Clinton, troubling. Despite her extensive preparations, Merkel remained doubtful about Trump's ability to shift his behavior once in office. On the other hand, Trump's preparation for the meeting was far less thorough. He reportedly read the briefing notes just before the meeting while in the washroom. When Merkel and Trump met for the first time in March 2017, she approached the encounter with a cautious and diplomatic demeanor, attempting to manage his unpredictable nature. She refrained from lecturing him and remained composed despite his erratic behavior and occasional offensive remarks. This meeting underscored the stark differences in their leadership styles and the challenges Merkel would face in dealing with Trump. Over the course of Trump's presidency, Merkel grappled with his disdain for NATO and the European Union. Trump repeatedly argued that the U.S. contributed disproportionately to NATO and insisted that countries like Germany owed money to the United States. Additionally, his erratic social media posts and public comments frustrated Merkel's efforts to maintain stable communication. Merkel's frustration with Trump's behavior came to a head in 2018, particularly during a tense exchange at the G7 summit in Canada. By mid-2018, Merkel had largely accepted the limits of her influence over Trump and shifted her focus to reinforcing the EU's position. She delegated negotiations and communications between Germany and the US to ambassadors and advisors. Merkel's personal life also brought challenges during this period. In 2019, she lost her mother, Herline Kastner, who had been a close source of support. Although Merkel kept a stoic public image in Germany, her grief was evident when she appeared visibly affected during an international trip, such as in Cambridge. The combined pressures of leadership and personal loss began to take a toll on her health, leading to public episodes of trembling, most notably during Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's visit. Chapter 16 Summary: Something has changed in our country. Chapter 16 examines the difficulties Angela Merkel faced during her fourth term as Chancellor. In the 2017 election, her CDU party suffered a significant decline in support, dropping from 41.5% to 33%, marking the worst result for the party since World War II. Despite this setback, Merkel successfully formed a coalition government with the Christian Social Union, CSU, and the Social Democratic Party, SPD, after 6 months of negotiations. The rise of the AfD, a far-right party with anti-immigrant and nationalist views, emerged as a significant challenge, becoming the third-largest party in the parliament. This was the first major far-right presence in German politics since 1945. The AfD gained significant support in East Germany, where social and economic grievances were prevalent, with nearly 20% of the vote. Initially, Merkel attempted to downplay the rise of the AfD, sticking to her policies and avoiding direct confrontation. However, she failed to address the underlying concerns of disgruntled voters, particularly in the East, where economic inequality and a sense of neglect were widespread. Marton highlights the lingering resentment from East Germany's unification, where many felt left behind and unable to compete with the dominant West. Merkel, often seen as disconnected from the struggles of the East, faced criticism for her refugee policies, which many East Germans felt prioritized immigrants over their own communities' needs. Merkel's efforts to engage with AfD supporters were unsuccessful and fell short of addressing the root causes of their discontent. In her final term, Merkel faced growing opposition within her coalition, especially from CSU leader Horst Seehofer, who criticized her stance on refugees. Despite these internal challenges, Merkel remained determined to resolve differences within her government. However, she increasingly appeared out of touch with the shifting and hostile political climate. Chapter 17 Summary: A partner at last. In May 2017, Emmanuel Macron, at 39, became the youngest leader in the EU, defeating the far-right candidate Marine Le Pen, who was allied with Trump and Putin. Merkel viewed Macron as a promising partner in the fight against authoritarianism and shared his vision for a united Europe, though their methods were quite different. Macron's leadership was marked by ambition and impatience, advocating for swift EU integration and reform. In contrast, Merkel preferred cautious negotiation and gradual progress. Their differing leadership styles reflected their countries' histories, France's more militaristic approach versus Germany's calculated, economically driven one. Despite these differences, both leaders were united in their commitment to fortifying Europe against external threats, such as Putin and Trump. While Macron strongly supported ideas like European autonomy, a unified banking system, and a European army, Merkel was more hesitant due to Germany's long-standing commitment to peace and anti-military policies. Their relationship was often strained by Macron's bold, sometimes unilateral actions, which frustrated Merkel. Nevertheless, they managed to find common ground on significant issues, including creating a joint defense program outside NATO and backing a banking union to safeguard Europe from future financial crises. Chapter 18 Summary: Toward the end. Chapter 18 covers Angela Merkel's final years as Chancellor, where she concentrated on implementing lasting policies and connecting with East Germans, who continued to feel neglected after reunification. Merkel, acknowledging their struggles, began to embrace her East German origins, something she had been hesitant to discuss earlier in her career. She became more open about the experiences of her youth, even expressing nostalgia for her childhood and the sensory memories tied to it. Despite these efforts, some East Germans remained critical. At a town hall in Stralsund in 2019, an AfD member accused her of steering Germany toward dictatorship. Merkel responded calmly, defending her refugee policy and emphasizing that Germany could not protect its wealth in isolation and had to think globally. Merkel also tackled gender inequality during these years. At the 2018 Global Forum for Young Leaders, she spoke about the lack of women in leadership roles and the positive impact they could have on both private and political life. She recalled her own experiences of condescension and became an advocate for women in politics, helping transform Germany's political culture. In 2019, Merkel visited Auschwitz, reaffirming her commitment to confronting Germany's past and addressing the growing issues of antisemitism and racism. She stressed the importance of remembering the victims and preventing such atrocities from happening again. As her final year in office approached, Merkel became more vocal about climate change, taking on the role of climate change ambassador and pushing for stronger action against global warming. She also worked on improving digital access in rural Germany and focused on understanding developments in artificial intelligence, knowing the importance of staying ahead of countries like China in technology. The COVID-19 pandemic presented a major challenge to her leadership. Merkel's calm, science-based approach and commitment to transparency gained the public's trust. She acted decisively, implementing strict measures and leading by example when she quarantined herself after potential exposure. Germany's relatively low infection rates were a testament to her effective management. Her leadership was marked by competence, empathy, and a focus on public health and economic stability. Merkel's diplomatic skills were key during the pandemic, securing an EU-wide deal where less affected member states helped those hit harder by the crisis, such as Italy, Spain, and France, through a substantial loan. In her final months, Merkel played a significant role in brokering a major deal between the EU and China, covering climate change, finance, trade, and human rights. This was her last major agreement before retiring and was seen as an important step in strengthening Europe's relationship with a key global competitor. Epilogue Summary. In her final year as Chancellor in 2020, Angela Merkel remained focused on managing the COVID-19 pandemic, which left her little time to think about life after office. Despite the overwhelming challenges, she preserved her global standing without any major scandals, avoiding the fate of becoming a diminished political figure. Merkel expressed a sense of loss over the absence of pre-pandemic social interactions but took pride in the success of the German BioNTech vaccine, developed by a German laboratory founded by Turkish immigrants. Kati Marton reflects on Merkel's legacy, which includes a more unified European Union despite hurdles like Brexit and the ongoing pandemic. Merkel's leadership was characterized by endurance and resilience. She never sought public adoration but instead focused on fulfilling her duties and ensuring effective governance. Looking ahead to her retirement, Merkel plans to enjoy simple pleasures such as walking, cooking, and traveling. As she stepped away from the political stage, she left behind a transformed Germany and a legacy defined by competence, decency, and reason.